interview. I am Claudia Cruz. If you're watching us, you're either on Channel 15 in Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Los Altos, and obviously here in Monteview, or in Channel 27 everywhere else in the county, Santa Clara, Palo Alto, San Jose. The polls are just closing, so we still don't have election results, but in the meanwhile, we'll bring you fantastic interviews with people that you may have or may not have voted for this evening. The first up tonight is Vice Mayor of Cupertino, Rod Sinks. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
So we were talking a little bit ahead of time, and the issues continue to be affordable housing and continue to be, congestion and traffic. And you didn't have a campaign this year, but you have. And how is Cupertino going to forward to changing, updating, in the area and helping and working with your colleagues to do so?
Well, Claudia, since I was elected in 2011, our housing prices have doubled in policies here, and we've really come upon a housing crisis. It's been many years in the making, and it's going to take years to fix. But I think the big issues in our communities are transportation, mobility, making it possible for the region to continue to grow and to thrive, and housing. We need a lot more of it, of all kinds, for all generations and all income levels.
What in particular are the housing issues in Cupertino? You're mostly residential, trying to bring more apartment buildings, trying to use it. Oren Mahoney, I think, is joining us later, and Valco is a consideration in Cupertino as well.
Valco has been a contentious issue. I think our residents have had a change of heart about building housing. Not everybody, and not fully, but we recognize that school teachers can no longer afford to live anywhere nearby. Over 56% of the teachers in our high school district, the Fremont Union High School District, serving 6 cities in the region, including Cupertino and Sunnyvale, say that they're going to leave their employment in the next 6 years because they can't stand to live. They can't stand the commutes from where they can afford to live. We who value education in this valley so highly need to think very carefully about an appropriate response to that. Either we fix this problem, or we have an unsustainable situation where our kids aren't going to get the education that every kid in California deserves.
And how do you work with local cities? Because it's not just the Cupertino problem.
Well, I happen to be president of the Cities Association this year, so there's one representative from each of the 15 cities in the county, and we've long been working on these issues of transportation and housing. Interestingly, Mountain View is pursuing a new approach for funding that transportation to try to see what can be done to get people from the housing things happen.
Well, we will need finance tax.
Yeah.
Does here so Bobby will thank you.
Here with Lisa McClain.
Well, we select the forums. We're based in chapters, based on we hold forum. So this year we had candidate forums for and the Westman School District, Los Altos, and the Los Altos High School.
And about candidates, obviously in person, that you didn't sort of a watchdog. And getting the vote out.
Welcome to Create TV San Jose. I'm Terry Christensen of Valley Politics, and you need to roll that thing faster. This is our live election night special. I'm your host, Terry Christensen. I'm joined by Julia Baum, reporter for Metro News and San Jose Spotlight. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
Thank you. We'll report shortly on the election results. We're waiting for the returns to come in. They should be in. They should be posted at any minute. And then we'll take a close look at several crucial local races and ballot measures with special guests, Raul Perales of the San Jose City Council, Assemblyman Evan Lowe, and Supervisor Ken Yeager. But this day is all about the voters. So before we do anything else, let's hear from some local folks about their plans for today.
We have an election coming up November 6th. Do you plan to vote?
Yes, I do.
You bet.
Absolutely, I do.
Yes, I do.
Absolutely, I plan to vote.
Yes, I do plan to vote.
I do.
I do plan to vote.
Yes.
Will you vote by mail or at your neighborhood polling place?
I'll vote by mail.
I'm actually going to vote early next Monday.
No, I usually go to St. John's Church and vote there.
By mail, actually, I drop it off here.
By mail.
Actually, by mail, and I actually did it recently with my grandma.
I'm going to vote by mail.
By mail. At my neighborhood polling area.
So,
Are you interested in any particular candidates or issues?
We're supposed to be in Mountain View now.
Personally, I really think it's important to try and flip the control of the Congress.
I'm interested in voting out Republicans.
There's definitely a lot of issues, but I am looking forward to being an informed voter and doing a lot of research this weekend to make sure that I am informed about all of the measures. Right now, no measures particularly stand out to me.
Not particularly. I'm just kind of doing my research for right now.
Not in particular. There's a lot of smaller community issues that I try to pay attention to. There's some issues with the water board right now.
Not yet, no.
Homelessness and how we're going to address that issue.
Prop 1 really matters to me. Affordable housing for veterans and families, working families. Well, basically just human rights.
Lots of enthusiasm there, and that's consistent with what the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters told us when we talked with her last week. She expected a participation rate or turnout of 60 to 70% in Santa Clara County, and that's very high for a non-presidential election. If that turns out to be accurate, the voters we talked to were clearly not the only enthusiastic ones. The registrar also told us that 78% of the voters in Santa Clara County cast their ballots by mail. Did you vote by mail or in person, Julia?
In person.
I like to vote in person, too. Go to the polling place. And mine was pretty busy. Yours?
I actually cast my ballot provisionally this year, oddly enough, but it was busy down at City Hall. So
Good. So that looks that also indicates good turnout. All those who voted by mail obviously voted before today, and we'll be waiting for the full results, and that could take actually days or weeks. All this takes us to a quick look at the early returns. These were posted just after 8 p.m. and when the polls close, and actually they are just the ballots that were sent in early. The registrar says these numbers represent about 40% of the ultimate vote after all the ballots are cast at polling places today, and the postal ballots that have yet to arrive have been counted. That's the ultimate vote, and that for weeks. Again, this is only the first count, and the candidates who are ahead or behind may change when all the other votes are counted. In most cases, however, the candidates in the lead in this first report will end up being the winners. That changes in maybe 1 out of 20 races. So what we're going to look at tonight is a pretty good indicator of who the winners and losers are going to be, even though these numbers aren't final. So let's start with our local congressional delegation. That's Zoe Lofgren, Ro Khanna, and Anna Eshoo. They're all Democrats, and they're all winners tonight. We're confident in saying that because only 18% of the voters in Santa Clara County are Republicans, and none of these candidates had a strong challenger. Same goes for all of the local members of the state legislature, that is, assembly members and state senators. All of them are Democrats locally. All of them are incumbents. All of them will be easily reelected tonight. For these races, at least, we're confident in calling the winners. It's not so easy with contests for local office where we have a bunch of real races. So let's take a look at the numbers. Well, we're not going to take a look at the numbers just yet because they haven't been posted just yet. It's pretty late. It's 8:13. I'm going to try once more on my computer here to get some numbers in. But it's not happening. So, Julie, what races were you keeping an eye on? We'll get some numbers later. We'll just keep going until we get some numbers.
I've been keeping an eye on a few, mainly districts 7 and 9.
San Jose City Council districts, yeah.
For San Jose.
Yeah.
Yes, and Santa Clara County Supervisor District 4, very hot one.
Yeah.
And a little bit on Milpitas there. I did talk to some candidates. So.
Well, good. We're going to talk about Milpitas a little bit later. Maybe we'll know who's in it, who's ahead by then. Let's start with Council District 7, San Jose. So that's South Central San Jose.
Yes.
The incumbent is Tam Nguyen. His opponent is Maya Esparza.
Yes.
Tam beat her by 209 votes in 2014, so this is a rematch.
Yes, yes, it was a very
What's your
close
guess on what's going to happen?
My prediction is I think actually Maya's going to come ahead tonight. We've seen a really strong performance from her this year. She has a lot more institutional backing. I think her odds this time around are much stronger.
What kind of institutional backing? Let's be specific.
Oh, we're talking about labor support, of
Yeah.
course. That was a major one. South Bay Labor Council gave her their
Labor
blessing.
pretty big time, yeah. And they spent a fair amount and put a lot of volunteer time in on that race. Tam got very little institutional support. He's been a little bit of a wild card on the council. None of his colleagues endorsed him. Some of them endorsed Maya.
Yes, that's true.
The district is pretty interesting. It's 48% Latino and 38% Asian, which would suggest Maya, as the Latino candidate, might have the advantage, as you predicted.
Well, she told me that she saw a voter increase, and as far as the Latino base there in the primary, she said, especially among those folks. So, you know, it definitely says something about her ability to reach out to that demographic.
Yeah, and she needed to do that. You'd think Latino would have the advantage with that margin, but 48% may not be enough because Latino voters aren't as reliable participants as Vietnamese voters. That's a much more loyal constituency. If Tam can pull together all the Vietnamese voters, if turnout is high in that constituency, if Maya doesn't produce a higher Latino turnout, then she could be in trouble.
Yeah, you know, though, it's interesting to consider all the things that he's also faced in his first term here, especially with the Coyote Creek flooding. There were a lot of people that were very upset about how that was handled. So that's kind of the thing I'm interested in seeing is, will that have a huge impact on his ability to get reelected?
Yeah, the flood hit his district really hard. I've got some numbers of campaign finance here. So he raised and spent about $115,000. Maya raised $138,000, but the Labor put in $97,000. So that's pretty much 2 to 1.
Yeah.
And Julia, look, we're about to be joined by San Jose City Councilman Raul Perales, and it would be really nice if we had some results to talk about, Raul. But they don't seem to be posted yet.
I have the results.
You do?
I do, yeah.
All right, what do you hear?
Well, in the local races here, we've got a couple measures that the city is very interested in, measures T and V. And measure T is coming in at about 68% right now.
Wow, that's...
so it's still a close margin,
yeah,
but something to feel good about out the gate.
And that needs a 2/3 vote, so 68% is exactly that 2/3 plus a little margin. I'm a little surprised, because usually bond measures lag just short of the 2/3 they need.
Yeah, and Measure T is our transportation bond, so
Yeah.
we have a lot of public infrastructure that is needing improvement. And so for us, this is an important one, and excited to see that margin. Unfortunately, Measure V is coming in at about 60%. and that's a really important housing bond that we had up. And that's a big stretch to make up the gap. I was looking at the numbers, about 5,000 votes behind. So it's lagging way behind, and I'm not too optimistic about that one, unfortunately.
Well, that's only the 40% or so that are, of votes that have been counted so far. So there's another 60% to go. And usually on measures like this, the numbers creep up on the yes side on bond measures. In fact, almost always, as the later voters. I can't see that. Sorry. As the later votes come in, they tend to be a little more progressive, younger voters, minority voters, a lot of working families and their voters. So T's passing, looks good. V's lagging.
Yeah, again, it's a little unfortunate because we certainly need all the help we can get when it comes to money for housing, affordable housing specifically. And what was important about this measure was that it sort of spread the wealth a little bit. So we've had some measures in the past, and we've been able to address some of the housing needs with the most needy, those that are currently or formerly homeless. This measure, Measure V, pushed it all the way up to 120% of the area median income. And so this were working families, teachers, firefighters, police officers, right, your public servants. And that would have been a really important, again, source of funds that we could have had. It's unfortunate, again, it is early, but it's a big margin to overcome, again, and Measure T is looking good. So, and I also was peeking at the results, certainly for who will be my colleagues next year.
Good. What can you tell us?
So Councilmember Tam Nguyen, the incumbent, my colleague, who I actually supported his opponent, Maya Esparza. I supported her 4 years ago and supported her again in this re-election bid. She's behind by about 1,000 votes, but about 10 percentage points. Now, again, small numbers of voters reporting, so it's actually, in my mind, one that I'll be watching closely.
Yeah.
For those that recall, 4 years ago, Maya was behind to start as well, and sort of inched up, and didn't quite get there, but it was a very close margin. So I think this is going to prove to be another close race in that regard.
And what about District 9?
Yeah, so in District 9, Pam Foley is also ahead by about 1,000 votes. They have a little bit more reporting. I think District 7 had around 6,000 voters. District 9 about 9,000 voters reporting. But still, Kaylin is about 1,000 votes behind and about 10 percentage points there. That one, I don't know. It's, this is not a rematch like Tam and Maya, so you can't really predict what might happen with some of the voters there. And I would say at the moment, Pam has a pretty commanding lead.
I think that's probably overcomable as well. Kaylin in the primary was further behind than he ended up being. He came very close to her when the votes were all in. So I would say both for Maya Esparza and Kaylin Gallagher, we'll see the vote grow. Will it grow enough? 10% lag is pretty big. Julia?
Well, okay, one race that keeps coming to mind, very recent, was District 4, supervisor race, and we saw how that flip-flopped a lot with...
District 4 City Council. Oh, no, you're right. No, you're right.
Supervisor in the primary with Pierluigi Oliverio and Don Rocha, and how Oliverio started out ahead and significantly looking, I think about 1,000 votes originally, if I'm not mistaken, and then it ended up narrowing and flipping and going back and forth.
Yeah.
And we watched that for days, if I recall correctly, just a few months ago.
Yeah, but we'll probably be watching these for days or weeks. Anything else you're watching, Raul?
Well, in that race in particular, obviously Don is a colleague of mine, and I supported him in that race. Susan also has a pretty commanding lead. I don't recall the numbers exactly, but it's around the 10% margin as well. But they're having a lot more numbers reporting because it's a county race. So that's going to be a bigger number to overcome. I think it was somewhere around 6,000 votes or so. It's a larger amount. But she is showing ahead in that one. So just another one, certainly to watch. Don definitely had a great showing at the end there, as you pointed out, to sort of make it into the runoff. Yeah. So these are always early results, but nonetheless, keeps it interesting.
Remember, they're 40% of the total vote, so often they do predict the outcome.
Yeah.
But especially in a race like District 7 with Maya and Tam, my guess is that's the one most likely to change as we proceed. So if your new colleague is Pam Foley and your continuing colleague is Tam Nguyen. What do you think that means for the direction of the council?
Well, you know, currently, and as you're aware, we've had almost a split council, with Tam kind of being a decisive vote a lot of times when you boil it down to local politics and you have a more labor-friendly or business-friendly candidates or elected, excuse me. And so Tam has sort of been a swing vote in a lot of this case. Don, leaving the council, was more of a labor-friendly elected official. It's really up in the air with Pam and Kaylin. I would say Pam is probably going to tend to lean more towards business-friendly. Certainly that's where her endorsements were.
And the mayor endorsed her.
And the mayor endorsed her as well. So I think we can safely assume that's where she'll fall on the side of things. Kaylin, a little bit more unknown. Certainly you never know until somebody actually gets into office where they might fall. But I would safely say Pam's probably going to fall into that court. That would mean sort of a pickup in that regards, if we're going to use kind of national political terms here. And then in that case, the only thing that I think would have kind of kept the council with a similar makeup would have been Maya taking over Tam and not having that now be such an undecisive seat there. And so with Tam, and if he can hold on to that, this will change the dynamic of the council. I think the mayor and more business-friendly electeds will have a majority, and an easy majority, even with Tam being a swing vote.
Yeah, if Foley's elected, that gives the mayor a more secure 6-vote majority, which leaves you in the less secure 4 or 5-vote minority.
Yes. And I'm sort of used to being a minority personally, but in life as it is. But you know, it's been. I think it has worked out well on the council. We have certainly been able to, even with Tam, and at times others on the council, even Chappie Jones out in District 1, that at times has been more of a progressive elected, and not all things fall, you know, specifically down the line of labor and chamber of business. And so we have seen more progressive votes get passed by the council with other voters. So I don't think it necessarily throws everything out the door. But what it does do is it does make it, I think, a little bit more easier for that divide to be clear.
Yeah, those of us who observe like to look at the split on the council, labor and business. In fact, most of your votes are unanimous. And the voting blocks shift around every now and then. So it's not as deep a division as sometimes we observers present.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of unanimous votes that get passed at the council here. And a lot of voters will remember just this summer, both Deb Davis and Johnny Camus even dropped their party affiliation as Republicans and went to independent. And I think just exhibiting more of what the Silicon Valley and our electeds tend to exhibit here, which is, in general, more progressive values. And so, as you point out, we may be unanimous on a lot of votes, but when we get down to some of the real, heavy debates, it does tend to be with the labor business, labor chamber politics.
Julia, do you have questions for Raul?
Oh.
No? You're good. We're good. I want to go back to Foley and Gallagher. Because Gallagher's race was interesting, or campaign was interesting. He got outspent about 5-1 if you add up what Foley raised, and the Chamber of Commerce spent a lot of money, and 70 or 80,000 just on negative hit pieces, really unfair ones.
Yeah.
On Gallagher.
Some really unfair ones.
Really unfair ones, nasty.
Yeah. David motivated me to contribute to his campaign.
Did it? Did he seek your endorsement?
Actually, I met with him a number of times, and something interesting that came from him personally was he was actually not seeking any local, San Jose Council endorsements. Yeah. I was willing to offer him my endorsement. I felt after the runoff with both him and Pam, and the number of times that we'd met, felt confident in my support of him. But he opted out of taking any local San Jose City Council endorsements, which I thought was an interesting tactic. Don't know how it might play out. Certainly in retrospect, right? If he does not win, one might say, oh, maybe you should have done that. But nonetheless, I thought it was an interesting tactic.
Well, besides elected officials or San Jose elected official endorsements, he didn't go after the labor endorsement or chamber endorsement or the other traditional endorsing groups that also spend a lot of money if they support you. It's one reason he had a lot less money.
Yes.
But he felt, I guess, that he wanted to be independent of both you all who would have been his colleagues or
Yes.
might yet be his colleagues, but also the big organized interests.
Yes. Yeah.
In the
I still
valley.
thought it was interesting though because he did take endorsements from elected officials.
Yeah.
You know, at higher levels of office, other school districts, and different areas around the region. So I thought that was rather interesting as he still took those endorsements.
So we're just about out of time, and we're going to go over to our partner station somewhere. It could be Palo Alto, it could be Mountain View. I don't know. The schedule's been screwed up tonight. But you're watching us at Create TV San Jose, and we're your local community media center. So you should check us out. You can support us. You can check out the facilities here. And we'll be back in about 40 minutes with more analysis from San Jose with Julia Baum. Councilman Perales, I know you want to get home to your wife and your new baby. Thank you very much for coming by tonight and bailing us out.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
It's a total fuck up.
KMVT Media Studio in Palo Alto. 7 years. And still columns. And like select unselect. To see by current and former also Miss Bird. Yes, continually 1985. She started on years as environment in serve the neighborhood leader, the commissioner, and for years. Right to it. And so
point that we've seen earlier. Is up for coming in at the bottom. So that's everything. Also got all of the news. Eric and Tom. And on top of that, I think they reached out into the
outsiders.
We stopped developing, and then it's
My name is Jay, live to you from NBC, the Palo Alto Weekly for just still contributing. I'm delighted you can take on civil war. Join us to go over some of the key and former Palo Alto Liz Niss and both with the government. Is held elected currently in her 16th year on the council. 3 years, and has been sustainable good leader. So our time is short. And I can speak about the race of City.
Seats going from 9 stands which he has. Tom and ran were elected number 3 far. Not all of them. Corey is running behind him. Has not lived very long, but jumped into the race. Good for him. So I think seeing tonight is for between growth and but that's how I would see the outcome of it.
So
city has some kind of business tax. They might call it something else, but they have some type of business tax.
It's been a long discussed item in Palo Alto.
Yes, it has, a very long discussed item. And I think that's going to come, and definitely the TMI, the transportation management issue, is a big issue.
Right.
We've talked about trying to do it with maybe Menlo Park and with perhaps Mountain View and East Palo Alto all coming in at the same time. So I hope that we push more on our regional solutions than we have. I think one of the regional positive things that happened, and Pat was very involved in this, was getting some water to East Palo Alto, which really needed it. And it was done, and it's now happening. So we have made strides in some areas, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that. We do have an affordable housing project that actually is in the architectural review right now. And I have high hopes that we might, actually approve it by the end of the year.
Okay.
I've heard
and you're going to tell the neighborhood where that is now? Where is that?
The affordable housing project it's on Wilton Court, but it's on El Camino, fairly close to Charleston.
Okay.
So it's basically near the Ventura neighborhood.
Got it.
But I think one of the things on the affordable housing that has been done in the past and we've kind of abandoned is really pulling together a community consensus around affordable housing and a value-based discussion. We've had this tension where affordable housing developers in the city have wanted to say, we've decided we're going to put XYZ at this location and this design, and the neighborhoods are kind of left out of the conversation.
Right.
You may recall way back over 20 years ago, we had the rebuild of the Palo Alto Medical Foundation site and the SOFA plan. We had a value-based discussion back when I was heading that neighborhood group, where the neighborhood said, we want affordable housing in our neighborhood. We want diversity economically and socially, and we embraced it. But that was neighborhood-led, and the neighborhood had a vocal, active role in it. I think that's the next. I've had this discussion with Shirley Pine, who heads the Palo Alto Housing Corp, and I'm hoping that we can have that kind of bring the community enthusiastically on board with thoughtful, affordable housing projects.
And we have a new director coming on the Palo Alto Housing Corp.
Okay.
And he will start at the end of the month, actually.
Oh, wow.
And as you probably remember, the funding for affordable housing is what's so difficult.
Right.
And I would say an explanation about what Pat is saying about location, there are only so many locations where there's actually some land that was purchased by the Housing Corp some time ago.
Right.
And that's because funding affordable housing has become even more difficult. But speaking of the housing, speaking of that, our comp plan speaks to adding 300 houses a year in Palo Alto. And the comp plan was adopted this last year. The comp plan was adopted in 2015.
Right.
And we are now 4 years into our comp plan, which is hard to believe.
Oh. And how many housing units?
We're very limited on that number of housing units, unless Stanford allows us to count theirs.
It was adopted 2017.
Actually, it turns out 2015. I was really surprised, and that's why when we just passed the limit on the amount of commercial.
The housing plan was 2015, not the comp plan.
Well, we could argue about that as we might.
Okay.
But it's in place now. We'd agree with that. And we would also say that the housing and the amount of development that's currently allowed, as you know, is about 50,000 square feet. So that's as of the end of July.
Yeah.
And that also plays into our comp plan.
Right.
So
the big issue, another big issue, is the traffic issue, and we've talked about that with the Traffic Management Association, TMA. And the other thing that neither one of you mentioned was open space or the environmental concerns. Have they been solved as far as you guys are concerned?
I have to think, I haven't heard much about the environmental concerns in quite a while.
Yeah.
I think the thing we hear the most is how difficult it is to park at the Dish, which is interesting, and how much use the Dish gets. Yeah. And when I met with the president of Stanford recently, I said, we really do appreciate that. Do you do the Dish?
I tend to hike in the open space areas more.
So one does the Dish, one does hiking in the open space. So we're blessed in our area to have a lot of open space that's easily accessible. And that's, you know, you can have the open space, but if it isn't accessible, it loses some of its
Nice
punch.
plug for the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, which started in Palo Alto, so you can ride the coattails.
Yeah, I was on the committee for the ads that we ran.
Okay.
That was Measure R for room to breathe.
Right.
Way back when.
But Jay, were you talking that aspect of environmental issues or the broader set of environmental issues? Because we've got a plan, which actually a very aggressive, comprehensive set of initiatives that is going to take focus and a lot to achieve. And we're looking at significant reductions in our carbon emissions and significant investments in renewable water supplies. And those things won't just happen on their own. So I think that is going to be a big challenge for the community. I think we've had so much momentum on that people are maybe starting to think it'll take care of itself. And I think we're going to return to some real focus on that. Our community, when you look at the community values, that is something that is high on the minds of the people who live here.
So you're about to have some more driverless cars running around town.
We have them.
Yeah, I was followed by one a few months ago, and made me a little nervous. It's kind of creepy, I thought. But how many more are likely to come in?
Well, I don't know, but I watched today, coming back from the Dish, and crossing the railroad tracks, there was a Waymo in front of us, but because there was a large truck there, the Waymo wasn't sure what to do and paused for probably 15 or 20 seconds, which is long when you're in traffic.
That's a long time. Yeah.
And then finally figured out to go around the truck. But I thought that's fascinating because we are seeing far more Waymos in town, and I think people are a little unnerved by them, but I think it's the future. I think it is coming. It'll be at some point when we climb in the car and it just drives away for us.
Well, its impact on transportation, though, was something that I think we had initially assumed that somehow it was going to have a favorable impact on our congestion or transportation. The studies now are indicating that it has the likelihood or the trend of an unfavorable impact. The shared vehicles and the autonomous vehicles. I mean, think about it. You got your car and say, Tesla, go get me a quart of milk. That didn't make anything favorable toward traffic. So we're going to have to look at how to integrate transformative technologies in a way that has a positive impact on traffic and not a negative one.
Okay.
Interesting to think of, isn't it? To think that the modern inventions are making it more difficult and not less.
Can a Waymo find a parking place easier than a driver? That's the question. So since traffic and parking are the big issues. So anyway.
Although I was recently, we were in Shanghai this fall, and that was rather stunning for traffic.
Okay.
Rather, it sort of takes your breath away when you're in that kind of weaving traffic.
But we have some other interesting races that are going on
Yeah,
tonight.
let's go on. Yeah. So name them.
We have our school board race and our open space district race that are.
Why don't you talk a little about the school board race? That's not one that I knew a great deal about. Followed it, know who I voted for, but I know you were very involved in that one.
Yeah, we had really 4 strong candidates for 2 spots, and the early results indicate that Ken Dauber is initially well ahead, and the next 3 are just neck and neck. And so we had Stacy Ashland, Kathy Jordan, and Shaunak Darup. And they're all quite interesting candidates. Stacy had really come more out of kind of the, I don't know how to describe it, the traditional school district kind of power structure. Kathy Jordan has been just a very strong critic of the district in their handling of recent sexual assault cases and other issues, and she's been, I would say it's fair to say, a vehement and very strident critic, and one that came on board and raised concerns over things that I think were actually already the focus and the momentum of the reform members of the school board, who were already implementing a whole series of actions in reforms those ways. And then Shaunak Darup is a young 28-year-old attorney who was a graduate of Gunn High School and is somebody who brings the perspective of moderately recent grad who understood the great pluses and challenges for improvement of our district. So that's going to be a very interesting race. That could be tomorrow before we find out who wins.
Okay.
So another observation I would make about that, which is the higher level, is having served on the school board, I found there are few governmental agencies that are harder to serve for than the school board. Parents have such an incredible expectation in Palo Alto for their kids, and they really anticipate that the school board is going to deliver that kind of experience and that their kids will get into the school of their choice, which quite often is Stanford, Harvard, or maybe Yale as a stretch school. But it's intriguing as to how much energy and enthusiasm there is around the school board, and yet how difficult a job it is to actually serve on it. So I admire anyone. I stopped at one term. I admire anyone that goes on for the second term. And also tonight on the ballot is, should the school board terms be limited to 2? So I'll be interested to see how that comes out. And also Measure Z, which again provides more money for the schools to modernize, to improve from where they were some time ago. And although Cubberley wasn't on it tonight, I think Cubberley will be an issue over the next few years if the latest
I was just going to ask about Cubberley.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, there was a city school liaison committee.
There still is.
There is.
There still is.
Yes, you're right.
And when does it meet? That's
It meets
the biggest
once a month on
Once a
Thursday
month.
mornings.
Okay.
Right.
Publicly scheduled meetings.
Okay.
To their credit,
we're down.
Okay.
30 seconds here, and I want to thank you both for being part of this.
Thank you, Jay. It's fun to be with you.
And it's good to see you both. And good luck. And you're going to run again, right? Is that right?
That's just Liz spreading rumors.
Okay.
Well, I saw his committee starting tonight, so that was it.
All right. So that's great. Well, thank you again. Good
Thank
luck
you,
to
Jay.
you both.
It's like old times to be with you, and
been a long time.
you played such a role in Palo Alto and in the news business.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay.
So, okay.
I think
Well, we're going to.
Welcome back to Valley Politics at Create TV San Jose. I'm Terry Christensen. I'm with Julia Baum, who's a reporter from Metro and Spotlight San Jose. And we're also joined by Santa Clara County Supervisor Ken Yeager. Welcome, Ken. Welcome, Julia.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
And by the way, if you're welcoming why our first segment was such a mess, we came on way earlier than we expected. We weren't prepared. We didn't have all the numbers. We were winging it a lot. Thank goodness Councilman Raul Perales arrived and saved the day for us. But this session with Ken is going to be much smoother, I'm sure. Ken, you had some observations about voter turnout today. What have you heard?
Well, we heard that we had more registered voters in Santa Clara County than we've ever had. 867,000 people registered to vote, the highest ever. We normally see those numbers for a presidential year, but never this high. But the fact that it was a midterm showed that there was a lot of excitement about this race.
And what was it you heard about the vote boxes the ballot boxes?
The ballot boxes at San Jose State were so full. I got an urgent text from somebody saying that they couldn't put their ballot in the box because it was overflowing, and so we had to get people from the registrar of voters, and then we make sure they went to all of the campuses where we have the voter mail boxes so that people would be able to vote.
Overflowing ballot boxes and on college campuses.
Yeah.
So that must mean the jump in millennial or younger voter turnout, because maybe the college students now aren't even millennials. It's the next generation.
I don't know, but
I'm not sure. But that means a lot of young people voting. We're going to just take a quick look at the numbers, and then we'll move on, and we're going to talk with Ken about some really crucial county races. So right now in Council District 7, incumbent Tam Nguyen is leading his challenger Maya Esparza by 57 to 40%. So that's pretty significant. Meanwhile, in District 9, San Jose City Council, that's the Cambrian area, Pam Foley is leading her challenger, Kaylin Gallagher, by 56 to 44%. Again, a pretty substantial lead. And then, as Councilman Perales reported, happily, he was happy, Measure T, the bond measure for infrastructure for the city of San Jose, is passing with 68% of the vote. It needs 2/3. And Measure V, the housing bond, is lagging. It's at 60%. It could catch up, but it's pretty far behind. If you're wondering why we don't have more results, it's because it takes a while to do all this counting, and we wondered about it too, because here we are in Silicon Valley, the heart of the high-tech universe, and it seems like our ballot counting takes a long time. In fact, Santa Clara County was the last to report its count in the June primary. So we went and talked to the Registrar of Voters about this and asked her, what's up with that? The last election, Santa Clara County election results were the last to be reported in the state. And a lot of people wonder why, if we're in Silicon Valley, we're so slow.
Well, there's a couple factors that play into that. Yes, I hear that we're in Silicon Valley and we should be able to count faster, but the fact is that we have to purchase a certified voting system. The Secretary of State's office is the responsible party for certifying voting systems, so we're only allowed to choose from certified vendors. And at this moment today, we have 2 vendors that have a newer system that is out there. So the other reason that we're slow on election night, and will continue to be for this November election, is because we have the same voting system that we had in June. And the main issue with that is we're a central count voting system, meaning that all of the ballots from the 849 polling places will need to come back to our office to then be processed, open the sealed ballot bags, and sent back to the 18 machines that we have doing the vote counting. So we will continue with the same timing on our results until we get a new voting system. We're currently in an RFP process to obtain a new voting system with the ultimate goal of implementing that in the March 2020 primary election.
So if it weren't central, the count could happen automatically at the polling place and then just the numbers come to you?
To that effect, we would do polling place, yes, we would do precinct counting, as they call it, and then basically like that cartridge would come back to our office and we would just upload the results and have them instantly instead of hundreds of volunteers needing to go through paper ballots and then running them through the counting machine. So they would be counted in the precinct, those totals then would be driven back to our office, and then we can upload them and be done in a much shorter time.
So you're in the process of finding a vendor, and hopefully this takes effect in 2020.
Correct.
And we'll get results faster than at least some other counties around the state in 2020, right?
Yes, the election night reports results will be shorter, but remember though, after that we have 30 days to complete the canvass.
Yeah.
And with such a high vote by mail percentage of voters in our county, the vote by mail process is a very manual, labor intensive process where we have to signature check every single signature on the outside of a vote by mail envelope and then physically extract the ballots and flatten them and take them to counting. So, but definitely our election night results will be much faster.
So, Supervisor Ken Yeager, you heard what the registrar just said. She's going to fix the count system, and it'll be faster by 2020. Do you believe that?
I do believe
that before?
I have heard that before, but we're finally going to be able to get the new voting machines and being able to do the ballot counting at the precinct level rather than having them all go to Burger Drive. So that should speed things up.
Well, that'll be great.
Yes.
It won't be last in the state. That's.
Well, I should say, you know, part of it is,
Yeah.
we do very well counting the votes that we get in early, but because of how many hundreds of thousands that we get afterwards, it just takes a while, and then you have the provisional ballots.
What about other county races? What were you looking at?
For other county races?
Yeah.
Well, certainly Measure A, which is the extension of the 1/8 sales tax, and voters seem to be approving that. The county does very well, actually, on some of our tax and bond measures. They certainly supported the housing bond 2 years ago.
He's getting 72%,
yeah.
and it only needed 50% plus one.
Yeah, and there had been some discussion about whether it was going to be a 3/4 cent sales tax instead of just the continuing of the 1/8, but that failed on a 3-2 vote. So it lost, and that would have.
You lost.
Yes, I lost.
On that vote.
All county residents lost on that one. But so there was that, you know, it'd be interesting to know whether it would have passed given how well Measure 8.
Well, like you said, the Santa Clara County voters have been pretty generous on
Very
tax
much so,
increases,
yeah.
transportation tax, huge housing bond,
Right.
and so on. When do you think they're going to say enough, or will they? Are we just generous?
Well, it's been going very well. I think there was a reason why we put the extension on this ballot rather than waiting 2 years or even more.
Yeah.
We didn't need to do it this soon, but we sort of felt that this was the time. There wasn't a lot of other tax measures, at least at the local level, on the ballot, so we thought this was the best time to do it, and it turned out pretty well.
In county candidate races, Sheriff Smith seems to be rolling to victory over her challenge
again. Yeah.
from John Hirakawa. Are you surprised?
Not surprised at all. People like a woman sheriff. The sheriff has gone through a lot of controversy and a lot of criticism, particularly in the Mercury News. Certainly, all the problems with the jail and the murder that occurred in the jail. But John Hirakawa it's just odd that he was the undersheriff when a lot of this was going on.
Yeah.
So it seemed awfully difficult for him to criticize the sheriff when really he was under his watch as well. And then there was the whole issue about the text messages from the Deputy Sheriff Association president, where he didn't really criticize those folks. So if he was kind of trying to take the higher ground, it didn't work. Plus, she's a formidable candidate, had enough money, and you saw her name and photo everywhere. So she just did very well.
You did. And 57% is a solid victory.
Absolutely.
Julia, were you looking at the District 4 supervisorial race?
Yes, I was.
And what do you think about the outcome there? Susan Ellenberg's winning?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised to see Susan performing this well, even, honestly. She's been a very active campaigner this year. She's really been aggressive about getting out there, doing a lot of precinct walking, even though my understanding is that's something that's sort of losing favor with some candidates these days. A lot of them are starting to turn more to social media, which is another thing that she got really big into using. We saw it utilized a lot in this election by her, a lot of Facebook ads and that sort of thing. So I personally, from where I see it, it's not surprising that she's doing this well.
Another successful woman candidate. Maybe this is another year of the woman?
Maybe. It is a little surprising how much resources labor put into the Don Rocha campaign.
Yes.
I clearly live in the district, overwhelmed in my mailbox.
$368,000.
Yeah, and Susan just didn't fire back at all. She really didn't have a big organization supporting her. She had a lot of individuals, but when you think of how much money and resources went into Don's race, and certainly with the full backing of Cindy Chavez and Dave Cortese, I think labor's got to really think about what happened here.
Both of those races, sheriff and county supervisor, over $1 million was spent between the two candidates in each race. So $2 million total. Is that the kind of money you spent on your race?
No. things, often with these races, and it even sort of plays into Pam Foley's race for city council, which we might talk about, where the chamber sort of does the hit pieces against her opponent. And so you either have labor for you or against, and the same way with the chamber. My races didn't really involve one pitted against the other. When you think of, Kalen did not do very well, and he didn't really have the support behind him. And I was sort of a little worried about Susan because she didn't have the big dollars, but I think she was just a candidate that people could resonate with. Her issues were children and families and education, and a strong woman, and did very well.
She did manage to raise and spend $400,000.
A lot of it was her own.
And she had independent expenditures supporting her as well. It kind of balanced off labor spending. The total on Rocha probably was more. But let's bring in Victor tonight. So, Assemblyman Evan Lowe, congratulations on your victory. Were you surprised?
The night is still young. Crazier things could happen.
We called your race hours ago.
Our county is very fortunate in supporting many of the progressive policies that we have, and much of the conversations on these races overlap with the State Assembly District, and so it's quite a great result to see forward-thinking individuals, nonetheless, a wealth of candidates.
And you're hitting about almost 70% in the first returns?
Close to, Terry, a win is a win. And so that's what I hope to try to...
You should do better than you did last time. 70% 2 years ago, come on.
Yes.
I'm sure it'll climb up there.
I'm hopeful that it'll happen.
And was it a tough race?
The races typically, just given the longer tenure that we have in the legislature now, is such that individuals generally don't run competitive races. Having said that, there could be a number of issues to which could be divisive issues. Let's say the gas tax that we voted on that hadn't been increased in over 20 years. I'm fortunate that we didn't have such a great challenge here, but in other places like the Central Valley or even in Corona, that was a key issue to which the incumbent Democratic legislator is actually behind in the race right as we speak here today.
So do you think the Democrats will continue to hold the two-thirds majority in the Assembly?
I believe we will still hold the two-thirds majority, if not have additional pickup.
Yeah. What about the Senate, the state Senate? The Democrats need to pick up a Senate seat.
We still need to pick up a Senate seat, which encompasses portions of Santa Clara County, and that is for the Democratic candidate, Ana Caballero, the Assembly member there. So things to be determined.
What's it going to mean if Democrats have two-thirds in both the Assembly and the Senate? Are you going to raise our taxes? Are you going to be putting all sorts of constitutional amendments on the ballot? Are you liberals going to go crazy?
Well, let's be very clear, Terry. The state legislature is reflective of that of our democracy and that of the people in the state of California.
So if you do go crazy, that'll just be democracy?
It is the people of the state of California who have elected all of us and has put into positions the supermajority in the state legislature. And as we see now also, there was the referendum of whether or not individuals in the state of California would like a say in the gas tax. And right now we see the numbers are such that those in the majority are in the no column because they also understand that we need to pay for our roads and our infrastructure.
Were there other races you were watching tonight besides your colleagues in the Assembly and the State Senate?
Well, I think we had a history in the making potentially for Ricardo Lara, a state senator running for insurance commissioner, from an individual that we know here in this region, Steve Poizner, who ran and is currently running as a no-party preference.
Yeah.
And the results currently statewide are looking like Steve Poizner is leading, which is unusual because from that of a no-party preference in this Democratic blue wave, with that of the distinction of a Democratic candidate, Latino surname, that is surprising. So I'm hopeful to see more results, but it's still time to tell.
Yeah, Poizner's an interesting test case, former Republican now running as a no party. Julia, were there other races you were watching? Weren't you keeping an eye on Milpitas for us?
A little bit, yes.
What's happened there?
Well, what are the numbers there currently? I think we were at 45-46% Tran is leading. So
that's the incumbent mayor.
Yes, the Rich Tran, the mayor of Milpitas. It looks like he's at this moment cruising into victory.
46%. versus 17% for Nunez and 28% for Esteves.
Yes, and that's
Yeah.
that's surprising to me. I'm surprised that Nunez is not doing better.
I bet he's surprised too.
Oh.
What else were you watching, Ken?
Well, Santa Clara.
Oh, City of Santa Clara.
Yeah, it's in my supervisory
Oh, my
district,
goodness.
and so was very well aware of that. And Lisa Gilmore, very strong mayor with very strong opinions.
Yes.
Been fighting the 49ers all the way. An opponent who really didn't have much backing. More or less was in support of the 49ers, although I'm not sure they got a lot of money from them. But she sailed through victory, and I think she has the majority that she needs on the city council, and will sort of forge ahead with her agenda.
She's at 74% right now, so
Yeah.
I think we can call that one too. It's even more than Evan Lowe got.
Wow.
The other interesting thing in Santa Clara, which indicates that politics there will continue to be in turmoil for a while, was Measure N, which is passing with 68% of the vote. Measure N, the city of Santa Clara is having its first city council election by district this time around. That was done by court order, which Mayor Gilmore and the city council didn't like very much. So they've put Measure N on the ballot, asking the voters, should we start this process all over again and figure out how we want to do it, not just do it the way the court ordered us. And it's passing. So that'll be interesting for the people who just got elected by district. They might be in different districts in 2 or 4 years. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, and from what I can tell, it didn't really change the members of the council. So maybe they're going to be less worried that it's going to be disruptive, or they'll have political outsiders all of a sudden winning. It seems like they've been able to have agreement on most of the candidates.
I think
that
you
have run.
endorsed Nancy Biagini in one of the districts. Nancy not winning.
She's not winning.
Yeah. What else are you watching, Evan?
Well, just with these races, the
Yeah.
end result, what I've experienced and observed over the past decade is so much more divisiveness on some of our city councils in some of the cities that you mentioned, in the cities that I've represented too, and much of that due to the advent of social media and misinformation that's gone out there. So I'm hopeful that individuals will still stay engaged, but also understand what these issues are about. Governance for a particular community, whether or not you're on the west side of Cupertino or the east side of Cupertino, we're also Cupertino residents. Let's come together on many of these different issues. And I'm just hopeful that these divisive issues, whether it be housing or transportation, individuals can have a disagreement and then still break bread at the end of the day.
That's going to be tough in some cases. I mean, Santa Clara, the ongoing battle about district elections, Cupertino, that's in your district?
Yes.
Big time battle over the future of Valco and what kind of development we're going to see. It kind of makes San Jose politics look calm and
calm for now, actually, oddly.
Calm for now. And if Pam Foley's elected, the mayor's got a more solid majority to move forward with. Well, I think we're just running out of time, I'm sad to say. So we're going to just remind everybody that they're watching Create TV San Jose, and I hope you'll remember. Would you please roll that fucking thing? I hope you'll remember that the sort of coverage you're seeing tonight is only possible because of nonprofit community media centers like Create TV. Visit createtvsanjose.org to learn more about the work we do and how you can support your only local media center. And find Create TV San Jose on YouTube to watch current and past episodes of Valley Politics, all of which are better than what we did tonight. We'll be back next month with a conversation with the state of the political parties in Santa Clara County with the Republican and Democratic Party chairman. But for now, good night.
I'm Claudia Cruz. If you're watching us, you're either on Channel 15 in Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Los Altos, and obviously here in Mountview, or in Channel 27 everywhere else in the county, Santa Clara, Palo Alto, San Jose. The polls are just closing, so we still don't have election results, but in the meanwhile, we'll bring you fantastic interviews with people that you may have or may not have voted for. I think the first up tonight is Vice Mayor of Cupertino, Rod Sinks. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
So we were talking a little bit ahead of time, and something standing out, continue to be affordable housing, and continue to be, congestion and traffic. And you didn't have a campaign this year, but you have colleagues who did. And how is Cupertino going to look forward to changing, updating, advancing some of and improving the situations in the area, and helping and working with your colleagues to do so?
Well, Claudia, since I was elected in 2011, our housing prices have doubled in all of the cities here, and we've really come upon a housing crisis. It's been many years in the making, and it's going to take years to fix. But I think the big issues in our communities are transportation, mobility, making it possible for the region to continue to grow and to thrive, and housing. We need a lot more of it, of all kinds, for all generations and all income levels.
What in particular are the housing issues in Cupertino? You're mostly a residential, one family. Is it trying to bring more apartment buildings, trying to bring more mixed use? I know we've Oren later, and Valco is a consideration in Cupertino as well.
Valco has been a contentious issue. I think our residents have had a change of heart about building housing. Not everybody, and not fully, but we recognize that school teachers can no longer afford to live anywhere nearby. Over 56% of the teachers in our high school district, the Fremont Union High School District, serving 6 cities in the region, including Cupertino and Sunnyvale, say that they're going to leave their employment in the next 6 years because they can't stand to live. They can't stand the commutes from where they can afford to live. We who value education in this valley so highly need to think very carefully about an appropriate response to that. Either we fix this problem, or we have an unsustainable situation where our kids aren't going to get the education that every kid in California deserves.
And how do you work with local cities? Because it's not just a Cupertino problem.
Well, I happen to be president of the Cities Association this year, so there's one representative from each of the 15 cities in the county, and we've long been working on these issues of transportation and housing. Interestingly, Mountain View is pursuing a new approach for funding that transportation to try to see what can be done to get people from the Caltrain station up to the major jobs and 2B Housing Center up in North Bayshore. So they really led the way and are a beacon of hope for how cities can actually take action when our regional agencies have not been effective in
And so we're the League of Women Voters of Los Altos. So any multiple candidates for any seat, we hold a candidate for them. So we have city councils of Mountain View, Los Altos, and town of Los Altos Hills, and the Mountain View Wisman School District, Los Altos School District, and the Los Altos High School.
I found myself 2 years ago referring to the videos, and you learn a lot about a candidate in person or on video than you do maybe just with a written statement. Right. On a national level, there's a lot of work done, sort of a watchdog area, and in getting the vote out. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Actually, I don't know a lot about the national level. I can talk about the local level.
Sure.
The local level, we're focused on is registering people. And so we register students at high schools, at colleges, new citizenship ceremonies where people have just they call citizenship papers, and so they immediately come to register. And then the next thing we focus on is informing voters, so that when they go to the ballots, they have been somewhat educated. And so we have candidates, and they're able to share their vision with voters, and voters are able to ask questions about the issues that concern them. So we've had, as I said, 7 candidate forums this time, including the El Camino Healthcare District, which had open seats. And in addition, we do pros and cons. Pete Stahl has done a lot of research on ballot measures, and he gives an unbiased review of the pros of each measure. They're very informational. The thing about the League of Women Voters is not partisan. So they're moderated so that all candidates are treated equally, and we never support or candidates. And also our pros and cons ballot measure reviews are also nonpartisan, so unbiased. And
by all early indication, it seems like there's for this midterm election. It's sort of been a lot of energy behind it. How do we keep that going? I think we keep reaching out to register voters, reaching out to underrepresented groups, learning to better communicate with young voters using the methods of communications that they use, and putting on events which we try to do that are relevant to our community so that people engage in dialogue and learn more about the issues. And our local issues of concern would be housing, transportation, why you have homeless people living in RVs on the streets. Yeah, I mean those are the big themes. I think you hit it. So yeah. You talk about younger people. When you say you use methods to engage younger people, what are some of those? Well, we've just Facebook, which is not necessarily younger people, but we're also using Nextdoor. I think we have a Twitter account. We're still reading through newspapers, through flyers, and hitting the college campuses as well. You mentioned to me that you were at. We were invited to Foothill, and we have done help do a registration drive. Well, thanks so much for taking time with us, and keep up all the great work. Thank you. And have found you all very professional to work with. Well, we think it's very important what you're doing. Thank you. Hi.
This is Claudia Cruz at the KMVT studios here with Sunnyvale Council Member Gustav Larson. Thank you for joining us. How was your election day?
Oh, it has been a really exciting day. There's a lot going on. I'm going between being excited and being nervous, and we'll find out shortly just what the vote.
What are you nervous about? What made you nervous about the day today?
You just never know how the vote is going to turn out, so I don't want to make any assumptions.
Okay, great. Before we said a little bit about the goals for Sunnyvale and some of the development projects that right now there's a. Right. And what would you like to see, particularly happening with the Civic Center? We talked about the library. How is the infrastructure in Sunnyvale? How can it improve in the next couple of years? Yeah. So we already have a whole set. Figure out how to redo our Civic Center. We came up with a master plan, approved that recently. So it's an opportunity to rebuild the City Hall itself so it can work, have our departments be efficient, and then eventually also rebuild the library to get a library that really serves the needs of the community. KMVT is a regional station, and one of the measures that we're looking at here in Mountain View includes a business finance tax. Yes. We're talking about financing Would Sunnyvale ever consider, would you support a business finance tax for Sunnyvale?
Well, Sunnyvale's actually had a business headcount tax for 50 years.
Okay.
It's at a lower level about, and I actually proposed a study issue for next year to consider taking another look at that level and figure out what the right. We don't want it to be punitive, but we want to. It might be time to take another look and update it. So that's one thing we're looking at. I think we'll actually be able to fund the Civic Center, but we've been looking at other things. There's some city property that's way out at the edge of the that we have sold and built that.
And also, I guess, talking about the regionality of the area, the region, the El Camino Real project, the Grand Boulevard project, the Bus Rapid Transit has that project folded, but there's no ideas of how cities can redevelop El Camino. What are your ideas?
Yeah, so we actually, we are updating our El Camino specific plan right now. A lot more housing, also room for more shopping along there, just to really concentrate people at certain key intersections so that I think that'll actually support transit much better as well. But it's I think a real opportunity to take that area to the next level.
And a quick hot button issue, marijuana. Mountain View now has dispensaries, is allowing dispensaries. Support dispensaries.
I think that's going to be coming, yet we looked at a little while ago, and there was enough uncertainty about what the federal government would do because it's still illegal at the federal. We decided to wait a little bit to let that play out before we move forward.
Thank you so much for joining us, KMVT. To support you. This is your second time or third time running?
This is my second time. So we were up bright and early wanting to make sure that we were out and trying to get any undecided voters and letting people know their polling places. And with polls being at 7 that go to any location to drop off their ballot if they hadn't mailed it yet too. So and then it was,
in the community. Talk to me about how, you 3 council members, how a potential configuration propose or to make proposals for the future of businesses in the city.
Well, I'm happy that currently we have a really having a coffee with candidates or then council members, and so it's the way that we look at it at the chamber is it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue between the city and the Chamber of Commerce, because we're here for the same thing. We want economic vibrancy and business development in our town, and we're ready that we have that kind of close relationship with the current council, and we will continue to do that with a new council.
And this is a great segue to this conversation we were having prior to sitting down. Was there's a measure on the ballot today about Google tax, but if you're elected, it doesn't pass. How if you're elected in USS? How would you then work together to try to help the city get the resources it needs to fix the road?
Thinking about, ways to engage more with the city when talking about how do we finance infrastructure like transportation, because it is a thing to do. But it's also looking at how can we do collaborations and outreach maybe for our county or at the state level, qualifying for dollars there, because infrastructure costs so much and we need congestion relief so much that it really is working together.
Potholes on El Camino.
Up at 4 a.m. So
in the dark, what do you think?
I was like, let's just keep it. Let's just the same. I'm with Arizona. Let's just. Well, I don't understand why we change it anyway, but.
Thank you for joining us. We'll come back for more. Welcome back to the KMVT studios. I'm here with Glenn Hendricks and Oren, I'm sorry.
Oren Mahoney.
It's okay. It's been a long day. You are up for council seat. How was your day canvassing?
So my day, I actually didn't canvass today. So I took 4 years off.
And you're...
That's for council.
And how was your day canvassing today?
Canvass as well. So it's interesting. My wife, she did as much
Personally, I've knocked on 3,200 doors since Labor Day, and San Francisco Sunday and took the day off. So, and I agree with you that the last day there were a lot of people. We already had crossed off people that had voted, and crossing them off, there were a lot more that said I've already voted. So, fortunately, some said they voted for me.
So, I mean, you're both here, so let's talk a little bit about tech. I mean, Cupertino. And maybe housing, because with the, which is great, gets all these other situations. And how do you, if you are reelected, are going to then work with the council to address some of these issues?
Yeah, so first off, there are over 8,000 businesses in Sunnyvale, and they're there, and they keep coming to Sunnyvale, not because we're trying to poach anybody, it's because each other. A lot of these companies are working and creating, they have features in each other's products, so they want to be close together for how they work together, and it's really great to have that diverse set of businesses in the city. In terms of housing and traffic, those are things that we've been working on, we'll continue to work on. A lot of people want to look at the jobs and housing ratio. Grand jury said that in Sunnyvale we have a jobs housing ratio of 1 to 1.07, so it's almost 1 to 1. That doesn't mean that we're done and that we can sit back on our laurels. What we do and what we've been doing is continue to zone for housing, and then to let them build it with the appropriate coverage.
And Cupertino, you have Apple Park.
We do have Apple Park. We have different businesses, but we've also got one gigantic business, and that's Apple, that not only between Apple Park, but their old loop. So two sides of that. Let's take traffic first. When I was the mayor, when Apple Park got structure. The housing thing is a big issue, and it's a regional issue, not a city-by-city issue. As you know, we have some opportunity to address that in Cupertino with the project and have a major impact from a positive housing there, but we'll see how that happens.
All right, so I've been there once, but not from this area, and it's just a movie theater, and I think one restaurant.
The theaters are gone now.
The theaters are gone now. So what, how is an issue? So what is the proposal there?
Well, they try to keep it short. So Falco's been dying for a long time. In fact, 4 years ago, the economic study was done where the Target store in Cupertino was generating more sales tax than the mall. And that's when Macy's was still there, and Penny's was still there, and Sears was still there. Yeah, they're all gone. Everything's gone. So the city council at that time changed the general plan to not have it be all retail. We have a no-growth group in Cupertino that fought against that, put a referendum on to basically kill a potential project there. And it's coming back. In the meantime, we're talking a little bit off camera here about the state doing their thing now. The state's, to deal with the housing crisis, has imposed some new laws, including one called said, if you meet these criteria, the city is, we don't care. The city council has nothing to do. Referendum, the state's going to go in and do that. So we've got two proposals there, and there's referendums. It's a big mess, and we're going to find a lot more in about an hour.
Okay. And housing in Sunnyvale, what's your priority for housing in Sunnyvale?
So where we're seeing is that most projects are going to mixed use, where you've got retail on the that's really the model of what and
urbanization of Silicon Valley.
I wouldn't call it urbanization. It's really, let's just call it mixed use. And we need to go ahead and be aware of how much height is being put in, not try and put too much in a particular location. This is what we're seeing. We're redoing the El Camino Precise Plan for Sunnyvale, and we're trying to take a look at what height's going to look like along the way.
Mr. Hendricks, thank you for joining us. Stay with us. Come back.
All right.
Good evening. I'm Henrietta Burrows, coming to you live from the middle. Recognize me as the host of the locally syndicated TV show, Talking with Henrietta. I have the pleasure tonight of talking with several show guests who are very knowledgeable about election issues in East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and in the county of San Mateo as a whole. Seated here in the studio with me is Bernadette Burns, the League of Women Voters, South San Mateo. And seated beside her is East Palo Alto City Council member Carlos Romero, who has served several terms on the East Palo Alto City Council. We'll also have an election expert, Jim Irizarry, who is the Assistant Assessor Clerk Recorder, the Assistant Chief of San Mateo County. And Jim will be joining us by phone. So, thank you so much for being here. It's a joy just to have you commenting on the election. With us, can you hear us, Jim? Are you there?
Yes, I am, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight.
Yes, fantastic. Well, I'm going to ask all of you if you've noticed any different about this midterm election. So, Jim, let me start with you. Have you noticed?
Our returns are going at a very good clip right now. As of today, we have received 100,000, etc., and we have 21,864 ballots that have actually been cast. In that on Friday, our registered voter number exceeded 400. We elapsed 400,000 registered voters in San Mateo County, and that's all indicative of a very active electorate and participating in this election.
Well, do you know, commenting earlier, before we started, talking about a first in San Mateo County with the mail-in ballot and some things that made it easier for East Palo Alto residents to vote. So, Carlos, what do you think? You were talking about the new system in terms of voting.
You know, before I answer that question, actually, may I ask Jim a question? So, Jim, are you saying that the county is voting at about 49%, roughly speaking? If it's, with those numbers, you're maybe at 197,000 total votes cast, or do you think it's going to be higher than that?
Oh, it'll be much higher than that.
Okay.
Right now are the ballots that we recorded that have come through the door or we know that have been cast at the vote centers. But if you take a look at our June election, we had over 70,000 ballots come in from Election Day +3. And Election Day +3 means that the election code allows ballots to be mailed all the way through Election Day midnight to have a postmark and received by the elections official within 3 days, and in this case, Friday, November 9th. So we still have all of those ballots that have to be processed between now and Friday that are still out there. And that's a significant number when one considers that the June election, while it was a large election under the California Voters' Choice Act, and I can talk a little bit more about that to just give an overview, this election far exceeds those numbers. So we're going to have a lot more ballots being processed and canvassed before the certification of the vote.
Yeah.
But
getting back to this issue, yeah, I think certainly I was in favor of the all-mail ballot. One of the biggest concerns, though, I had coming from a low-income community of color was, you know, whether or not we were going to be able to roll this out in such a way that there wasn't going to be confusion. We as a community tend to vote, we're voting pretty strongly at the polls themselves. Sites, we have kind of a regional center, and then we also have our city council, or the city hall where we vote. At both polls, there were probably about 120 people outside of the polls that had not been able to get in at 8 o'clock. They were able to vote, but they were in a line of 120 at one of the centers, and at the other center, I think it was about 50. So clearly, I think there may be some little glitches in terms of trying to get our residents through to actually vote. Now, they all voted, but you know, many people were waiting an hour.
So do you think they realized that there was a change in the voting?
Well, I do know from some early reports in the morning where we actually had people who were still going to their previous polls, and we actually called the county, and they did do this. We asked the county to place information at all of the previous polls so people would know that they could go to 2 vote centers within East Palo Alto. Critically important.
Let us talk, and Jim, I want you to chime in, and also Bernadette, and of course Carlos. What is it that you think triggered this massive turnout for a midterm?
Well, from the county's perspective, we're part of the California Voters' Choice Act. We are a leader in the state of California in all-mail ballot elections. We were selected by the state legislature to conduct all-mail ballot vote center elections in San Mateo County. And so that is a new election model where individuals, every registered voter in San Mateo County receives a ballot in the mail 29 days before. And then, in addition to that, we open vote centers 29 days before the election. And so the Voter Choice Act basically is designed to provide choices to voters, whether you can vote at the ease and convenience of your home with an all-mail ballot. You can come to a vote center. You can cast a electronic ballot on a voting machine. You can vote. But I would like to speak to the issue of vote centers right now. What we are finding is by far and away the voter centers today California that as a registered voter. However,
if I could stop you for a moment, you can make it as easy as you'd like for voters to vote, but that doesn't necessarily make them vote. And so I would like to know, and I haven't heard anything from Bernadette yet, if there were some issues that you think made people such active voters.
Well, certainly there are a lot of on the state ballot, some of them quite contentious, and as we were saying earlier, the advertising that has been surrounding them is very inflammatory. So one of the things that the League has done is go out and talk about the pros and cons of the proposition in a neutral manner so that people can be informed about them and make a choice. And I think, both in the local and statewide, transportation and housing have been huge issues, and several of these relate to that. And there are also many, both county and local races that I think are very interesting. So that I believe that has pushed turnout.
Okay, so Jim, Bernadette mentioned transportation and housing. I'll hear from Carlos. Then I'd like to get back to you with what maybe the numbers are showing now. So Carlos, what is it that you think are there issues on the ballot that you think sparked people's interest more than usual?
Let me just say, I think we have to put this context, we have to put this election in the context of the national election, right? And the election of congressional seats and the possibility that actually the House may, switch hands.
Has already, according to the results I've
heard.
Right.
I do not believe that California is immune to, that energy, right? And I think that when people say there could be change involved, people go and vote. Whether, we're going to make a big difference, at least in San Mateo County, to flip the House, we won't. But nevertheless, that energy gets translated into voting issues. So, locally, we have Measure W, which is very important, I think, transportation issue. A little contentious, it's very close, right? But, that paired with Prop 6, which I think many, many cities around the state have benefited from already. East Palo Alto with an infusion of cash of about $6. It will actually allow us to redo 2 whole streets in the city of East Palo Alto.
So talk about Prop W, what it was all about.
Right. So Prop W is a half-cent tax in the county of San Mateo, right, that will generate a for transportation. But really interesting about the proposition is that 50% of it will actually go to support public transit, which is unheard of in many of these ballot initiatives, because what we're trying to do is reduce traffic and congestion. And one of the ways to do that is indeed to make investments in our public transit system so that people can get out of their cars, right? Reduce the greenhouse gases and the vehicle miles traveled. Indeed, we can have a better environment and a kind of less congested, less congested commute.
Sure. Now, do you have any results right now? Bernadette mentioned transportation and housing, and Carlos also mentioned transportation. Any results in terms of the propositions?
Yes, we're very processing came in late yesterday, so all the ballots today are to these numbers. So what we have at this juncture, we have as of the 9:30 report. Let me see how many the percent here that we've got of returns. Trying to. One second.
So while you're looking, my colleagues here in the studio are looking over what results that they have.
Right. Well, we have right now approximately 17, almost 18% of the total ballot, voters, and also the ballot. About 17% of those are what's being actually reported at this moment. So it's far too early in the game. We see, it's hard to make any predictions or any trends. Numbers.
Okay. Measure HH was a big issue in this election. Mm-hmm. So say something about Measure HH and what figures you have. Ask Jim what figures he might have.
Well, again, I agree that housing and transportation have been big issues within the state. Certainly in our county through Measure W. In East Palo Alto, we have rent control, but we also have an incredible need to build new affordable. HH actually would tax commercial houses $2.50 per square foot per year, generating right now about $1.65 million for affordable housing and for job training programs in tech and the construction field. And right now, it needs 66% to pass, and the last I checked, which was about an hour ago, it was at 74.6% in favor, which seems to be trending in the right direction. 0.4 against.
Okay, so Jim, we heard the figure from Carlos. Do you have an update in terms of for Measure
That is the 10 o'clock report, which I'm looking at. We have, one moment. We have right now 0.60 as of the 10 o'clock report. Percent of for HA is yes, 0.34% no. That's as of our 10 o'clock report.
So that seems to be a measure that's passing, a measure that's passing. So what do you think, in the minutes that we have left, the big turnout for this midterm might portend for the future?
Yes. First of all, I think it is a credit to the visionary leadership that we have to do all-mail ballot elections. By that very measure being in the county, you're going to see an increase in voting participation. It's created a network of community-based organizations and community partners. And so we have civic engagement going on at unprecedented levels. I think that is a very, very positive outcome of that effort. And I just see an increasingly engaged voting public, and that's only good for our democracy and voter participation.
Sure. Carlos, do you have anything that a council member in East Palo Alto?
Well, I would agree with Jim that anything we can do to expand the franchise, to make it easier to vote, is what a democracy is about. And I do agree that in this county, we were kind of the trailblazers on this. I do still think there are a few kinks to work out, right? I think not all people in those long lines were actually voting provisionally. Many people decided that they couldn't find their ballots, right? Or could not find their ballots, and they went to the polls, and there was a process they had to go through. And But I think in the future, I hope very much that we get more and more folks actually filling out their ballots beforehand and mailing them or dropping, because and I think that's part of an educational process that we as city elected folks need to do, as well as, folks over at the county. But I think we're trending in the right direction in terms of expanding.
So we've heard about e-voting is also bringing people out. And Bernadette, you are involved in the whole area of education. What about the education in terms of getting voters up to date and up to speed in terms of the issues? That's where the League of Women Voters is concentrated.
We do a lot of outreach on that. It's wonderful that we have 29 days or more in which to vote. It's made it more difficult in getting out information about the propositions and things in a reasonable time frame for people early on, although given what we've seen in the timing of when people vote, and I dropped off my ballot on June 5th in the afternoon, and there were people at the last election and at this one too, people seem to have, procrastinated. And I think, like you said, that is some education. We do need to don't wait till the last minute to vote.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll make Jim's job easier.
So Jim, would that make
Voters
you?
Edge.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So in the 30 seconds that we have, Jim, I'll let you share the final words.
Well, I agree with the councilman, and that is that elections is a continuous improvement process, and we have citizen committees established by our Chief Elections Officer, Mark Church, to give advice on how we can improve the system. I actively encourage our voting public to participate on those committees. That's our Voter Education and Outreach Committee, our Language Accessibility Advisory Committee, and Accessibility Advisory.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry we're out of time, but I'd like to thank you, Jim. I'd like to thank you, Bernadette. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. I'd like to thank our partners at KMVT and Korea TV, and certainly the viewers. Thank you. I'll turn it over now to Mountain View. That from here. Thanks so much. That's it.
That went fast.
Yes, that's 20 minutes.
Just keep talking.
Okay.